Ross Taylor couldn't see at night or when the clouds were in. Eventually, he had to see an eye specialist who would fix his eyesight. In the 2 years before the change, he still averaged more than 50 in international cricket. The top level of batting talent can basically see in the dark. That is who we are talking about in our new book, The Art of Batting. Head over and order your copy today. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now. Welcome to Good Areas Live. Jarrod Kimber here on the Wagon podcast, the show that answers your questions on cricket. We have many a question. The best way to get them in early, of course, is via Patreon, like many people do. But if you are on YouTube at the moment and you're live, you can always put in a super chat as well. But Sam, he supports us on Patreon, and he asks, how much scope is there for exploiting inefficiencies such as the NBA's three-point explosion in modern cricket? Are there any obvious candidates for this that you feel could significantly change how cricket is played over the next decade or so? I don't know what the next one is, otherwise I'd probably be doing it myself with teams and making millions. But I mean, the obvious one is the wobble ball, right? It's a huge change. People don't bowl swing as much as they used to. They don't bowl conventional seam as much as they used to. Teams are using more seam than they ever have sort of before. Teams are less interested in who their spinner is. Australia might not even use a spinner at home, right? And haven't been using Nathan Lyon for the last couple of years. So that's obviously the one that's happened already. I suppose the next one is that sort of the six hitting with the West Indies probably also was the other big one that we saw in T20 cricket. I don't know what the next one is though, Sam. It's when I was doing analysis, like that kind of analysis, that's what you were looking for the whole time. Whereas now, obviously, we do a different kind of analysis here. So if something pops up, I'll certainly bring them in. But off the top of my head, I can't think of anything specific anyway. Lemon says, how overrated are England? Two of their top five average low mid-30s batting on some of the flattest tracks in the last decade, and somehow Mark Wood has become one of the best bowlers of all time over the past few months, despite averaging over 30 with the ball. Also, somehow the British media sees this current Australian team as poor after winning 8 of the last 11 matches. I don't think England is particularly overrated. Based on form and everything else over the last 2 or 3 years, like you would take Duckett, Brook, Root, Smith over Australia's, anyone outside of Steve Smith, right? Like that's a lot of batting talent compared to Australia's batting talent. I think the bowling attack is a little bit overrated. I talked to Harmy about this. I get the whole idea of Jofra and Mark Wood, but they haven't consistently done it in Test cricket. But I understand that they can. Cast was disappointing. Atkinson has been disappointing at times. Wokes is already gone. Michelle Bashir can't bowl. But Ben Stokes was incredible with the ball of recent times, so you'd have to say that's a massive plus. But yeah, Australia doesn't make any runs, Lemon. So, I mean, they've won 8 over the last 11 matches. They've still got a fantastic bowling lineup. But they're batting has arguably got worse towards the end of that run than it has beforehand. It's, with Usman Khawaja not making runs and what's Travis Head over the last couple of years, like I wouldn't have thought. I mean, Webster has probably made some of their runs of recent times, right? Like they've really just sort of dropped off Australia. As I've said before, if you have the best bowling team, you should win a lot of games. But now they don't have as good a bowling attack, right? Because Pat Cummins is not going to play as much. So even within that, I think there's some real issues. So, yeah, even Head's been averaging in the 30s. I think the big difference between the two sides is that I still think that Australia's bowling lineup, even without Cummins, is better. But I worry about Boland versus England based on what happened in the last series. And if Marnus's form comes back, or Head's form comes back, or probably Khawaja, I probably think maybe is a step too far, or Webster or Green step up, then Australia should win that series pretty easily unless the bowling completely falls apart for them. But yeah, I don't think England's overrated. I just think that they've got a really good chance. You know, Australia's like what, one more bowling injury away from, I don't want to say disaster, but how much better are they than Australia at that point, right? Like, and so how much better are they than England at that point? So they feel pretty level to me. I mean, home team with a better bowling lineup, I'm going to pick almost every time, and nothing much has changed with that. Manon says, in what ways do you think AI will change our sport in the near future and also 10 to 15 years from now? I think it'll make us understand pitches a lot better. It just allows, it just allows you to do things a lot quicker. And so I think the big problem with that analysis in cricket was that they didn't want to pay the people to do the analysis. Whereas a lot of that is just simple number crunching, right? Entering data into machines. AI takes all of that away. So I would say there will be a big analysis boom of cricket. Talent identification, I think, is a big thing that AI can change. Individual tactics within a game. So yeah, I think there's quite a big difference that AI can have over a long period of time. I don't know what it does in 5 to 10 years, but certainly in that 5-year period, I would assume that teams will just be using that to crunch numbers and information pretty regularly. Sashimi says, what is the one thing that the NBA should copy from the IPL and vice versa? What should the NBA copy from the IPL? Fascinating. NBA is such a well-run league in some ways. The big problem that the NBA has, of course, is that it's got too many games. I hope that when they do the IPL, that's a thing that they kind of work out is you probably need like 3 games a night, not like 7 or 8 games a night. So you really want your best players to be playing in every game. Give or take the odd rest because back-to-backs or flights or whatever. And the NBA hasn't managed that now, right? The NBA should probably be 65 games. And you could argue that the IPL doesn't have enough games and it should up them. But you really want to be in a position where your best players are putting in 100% every game. And I would say that the IPL is much closer than that than the NBA. Vice versa, the NBA's genius is probably from 2 major things. It's the global element of the NBA. How much they just gave the game away for free so that everyone had to watch it. So it became, the format. There's just no point you really watching basketball outside of a competition in your country, right? There's no point you really watching the Spanish league, right? Or any of the other leagues because you have access to the NBA so easily. So they've got so many people from around the world as just being like, this is just, even if it's not our favorite format of basketball because of, anything else, it is the format of basketball that you have to watch. And I think that they did very, very well with that. I believe that the other thing that they do very well is that during their off season, people are all talking about them all the time. To the point at which it almost causes an issue that free agency and the draft almost overshadow the NBA finals at times, right? So maybe they've got the balance slightly wrong. But those 4 months, Jonathan Kuminga is like what's Jonathan Kuminga? What would he be if he was a cricketer? I was going to say Sai Kishore. He's not as good as Sai Kishore. He's like Deepak Huda, right? There's something there, like a young Deepak Huda. Right? There's something there, and it might come out, but it hasn't come out yet. He's not particularly highly paid or like a major part of any franchise. But you can also understand why teams might want him. I just spent 2 months with everyone talking about Jonathan Kuminga because contract stuff is so interesting, right? The free agency signings are so interesting. The draft is so interesting. All these different things that IPL just doesn't have. The IPL just disappears into a vacuum way too much. Part of that is the length of the season, but part of that is just because there's nothing to talk about for months on end. You can't have a sport that disappears because you cannot guarantee that your fans are going to come back next year. Just in modern world, I just don't think you can. Aravind says, my nephew and I were recently trying to compile an all-time great Test 11, and while I felt Sobers had to be a lock in this team, my nephew felt, why not Callis instead of Sobers on account of a better bowling average? Is there a definitive answer as who the better cricketer is between the two and why? We ultimately ended up by throwing both of them in the team. So he has a better bowling average, Callis, but he played on pitches that were much better for bowling. And if you look at it from a match factor perspective, I don't know if he's a better bowler than Sobers. But specifically, I've said this a million times. Look at the amount of overs they both bowled. I think Callis bowls 22 overs a game, and I think Sobers bowls 38. So let's say that Callis is a 5% better bowler than Sobers, right? I'd still rather have the 5% worse bowler for an extra 16 overs available to me, especially when it's varying kinds of bowling. Sobers gives you seam, he gives you swing, he gives you spin, he gives you bounces, he gives you Yorkers. Like there's so many different things that Sobers can do with the ball, and some of them he wasn't as good at. But he still I think it's pretty fair to say that he was a good sort of secondary spinner. Probably high 30s average of a secondary spinner, and probably as your third or your fourth seamer, and he played as a second seamer at times, probably averages 28, 29. So I think if you just looked at his numbers with seam bowling compared to Callis, I would say that Sobers would have a much better record as a seam bowler. Unfortunately, no one's ever going to be able to prove that, but I think he would on flatter wickets, and as a better, more all-round fielder as well. Could also argue maybe could have batted in more batting positions. Maybe, I suppose with Callis, maybe you don't have to do that. Reese says, neither the great Australian or West Indian team had an all-rounder in it, or a top-class all-rounder in it. Is that simply because of the amount of world-class specialists they had? Does team composition not call for one when you have that good of a bowling attack, or is it simply all the ones they tried were never world-class? Okay, so we've just done a whole podcast on this, on the Australian side of this, Reese, because Australia did have a bowler that could have played, and they should have, an all-rounder they should have played. He wasn't like a great all-rounder. I'm talking about Ian Harvey here. Ian Harvey would have averaged about 27, 28 with the bat at number 7, but explosive, right? Like very, the Ian Harvey innings were manic. He would have torn teams apart on occasion. And as a bowler, probably averages 32 to 33 with the ball, but would have been really, really economical and would have kind of played as a second spinner, but would have allowed for them to use Tate, Fleming, Lee, those sorts of bowlers much better, right? So I think that's the way that you would have done that, and you bat Gilchrist at 6. The truth is, you need 4 people who can take 20. It doesn't matter how many. You need bowlers who could take 20 wickets to win test matches consistently. And both of those teams had bowlers who could take the 20 wickets consistently. What an all-rounder allows for is more of an option to be able to take those 20 wickets. Whereas in those 2 bowling attacks, you could argue that as I just have, that Ian Harvey would have been really handy. And I don't know, if Andre Russell was around in the West Indies times and, from 75 to 95, if Andre Russell is around, you play him as the 4th seamer. You don't really lose all that much as with the 4th seamer. Different kind of bowler. And then that allows him to pick, in their case, a more specialist spinner, right? So Andre Russell bats at 6. Dujon / whoever bats at 7. And then they have a spinner and the 3 frontline quicks. That probably makes them a slightly better side because Carl Hooper and Viv Richards are still bowling a lot of overs, Larry Gomes and whoever, without taking him. So if they had Andre Russell at that point, Jason Holder at that point, I think they would have been a better side, right? But their ability to take 20 wickets was so ridiculous that you could argue that bringing in Holder, and they did have an all-rounder, right? They had Bernard Julian. And I don't know what his overall figures were, Bernard Julian. But the problem with Bernard Julian compared to certainly Andre Russell was just that he just was, people just didn't mind facing him. So he plays 24 test matches, 200s, averaging 30 with the bat, 24 matches, 50 wickets with the ball. First class cricket, he was much better than that, but he just couldn't take wickets at that level. And so you kind of need someone who's either going to keep the pace bowling pressure on or was taking wickets. So I think Holder and Andre Russell could have done that, and they would have made those sides better because then you could have fit the spinner in, and then there's just no weaknesses. But basically, to be a great side, you need a repeatable batting lineup, which both of those teams had, and you need the ability to take 20 wickets. Most teams need more than 4 bowlers to take 20 wickets. But because of the kinds of bowlers that you had there, you had the ability. There was no weak bowler in a lot of those sides, right? Like you don't start to see the weak bowler come in really until after Patrick Patterson and Ian Bishop have their issues, right? Like up until that point, there is no weak bowler, and so they're always going to take the 20 wickets. And that's all. That's the more important thing, I would say, out of those two sorts of situations. Cam says, "What's your favorite book on club cricket, and why is it Gideon Hayes' The Invincibles?" I don't know if I've ever read another book on club cricket, so I suppose it is that. There's The Invincibles. It's called something else in other countries too, isn't it? I'm trying to think of another book I've read on club cricket. Marcus Berkman, does he have a book on club cricket that I'm not sure I would have read all the way through, but I feel that that's another one. There's another guy who did a book about wanting to go up against Bradman. Sorry, against Sachin, Chasing Sachin, I think it's called. I don't know if you call that a club cricket book, but yeah, I really haven't read a lot of club cricket books. I don't even know how many there are. I'm sure there's a lot of them. Karen says, and I probably forgot one. Karen says, rain, and more rain. 4 to 5 matches in Women's World Cup have been washed out. It's frustrating to see results and teams' fortunes being dictated by the weather rather than performance. With all the technology, infrastructure, and financial power cricket has today, should we still be at the mercy of rain to this extent? Is there a realistic way to protect the integrity of major tournaments from something as predictable as the weather? If we're going to play during countries' rainy seasons, I think we kind of have to accept it at a certain point. We don't play enough cricket games at the one venue over and over again to justify roofs financially. That might change as I think roofs will become cheaper. And I also think that when we think of it, we think of that sort of the Telstra, what's it called? The Docklands Stadium. That's quite a full-on roof, whereas I don't know if we need something that full-on for cricket. So I do think there are ways to put roofs on stadiums that we will work out within the next 5 to 10 years that will be affordable for cricket. But yeah, we just keep playing tournaments in rainy seasons. I mean, I don't, there should be a better way. It really has ruined that tournament. Just go back to Women's World Cup of every time I don't have every day free, right? So it's a perfect example of, what's the score in the other game? Australia versus England women as I sit here. 98 for 4. So I've got to finish this podcast so I can go watch some of this game. Obviously, I can catch up on MB play, but I don't have every day free to just watch the games because I've got so much other things to do. I'm not being scheduled, being able to be able to watch these. And so we're in a situation where, like, I think every time I was available to watch a game, it was washed out, and you just lose your energy. And my fans are very similar to me. It's very rare that you have the ability to watch all the games. It's not even you're not drawn back to the other games because you've already missed like 3 or 4 games by that point. It's a real shame for what could have been a great tournament. It's funny. I was talking to John Norman about this. I can't remember if it was on air or off air, and he was saying like it was shaping up to be brilliant, and then everyone just lost their energy at the same time. Ajit says, at this point in time, would it be fair to say India unable to defend their T20 title in 2026 would be a bit of upset than what happened in 2023? No, because we are 2 months out from there. We don't know when you say something like that, you have to understand, Ajit, there could be injuries, it could be everything else. That 2023 side was absolutely rolling at home. We could see them play. So it's very different than saying 6 months out. 6 months out, anything could happen. 3 blokes could lose form. 2 blokes could get injured. Right? Like anything can happen there. Whereas that tournament was as it was going on, it looked, inevitable that India would win it. And they did not. So at the moment, no. That might be different when the tournament is played out. Like India could be more dominant and not win. And if that was the case, then that would obviously be, quite a full-on situation. Anyway, we'll be back after this. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now. Ben Duckett does not leave the ball. He goes after everything. That is his signature style. Well, actually, no. Perhaps now he is best known for Duckett's Buckets, his new hat range. I don't know if Herbert Sutcliffe sold his own hats, but I would definitely have bought them if he did. But Ben Duckett does, so you don't need to be left alone without one. Chase down your own Duckett's Buckets today. Adityan says, do you think the 2015 World Cup winning Aussie team is underrated? They had Prime, Faulkner and Haddon at 7 and 8, followed by Johnson and Stark. I think it's just forgotten about a little bit. I suppose the 2007 team is also a bit forgotten about. And you could argue, that team was maybe the most dominant we've ever had at a World Cup ever. And yet, very rarely talked about. I think 2015... team was very, very good and is respected, but it comes on the heels of the 3 titles, right? So there's only one World Cup that they don't win in the middle of that. So I think from that perspective, it's maybe slept on a little bit. Yeah, I thought that was a good side, but it's a one-off team, whereas Australia at other times have had more than one-off teams. So I think that's just how legacy works, really. Rob says, what have you heard about USA Cricket and ACE? This mess makes me worried about minor league and major league cricket. MLC has major investors, including IPL team owners, but there doesn't seem to be any public comments or actions from him. There's law suits are plenty, so I suppose some of it is because of that. Certainly, ACE have released some statements. I don't know what can be said once the lawsuits start as well. Like, I don't know what the legalities are of those sorts of things and everything else. I'd find it very hard to believe that USA Cricket are going to come out of this well. Especially if this stuff gets in front of a judge or a jury. If I'm USA Cricket, I do not want it to make a courtroom. There's so many skeletons there. And ACE know about a lot of those skeletons that people have been overlooking. I'm assuming it will be sorted, soon, but I don't know what the future of USA Cricket is. I think if you're putting money on one organization, sticking around for a while and one not, I think you probably put your money on ACE before you'd put your money on USA Cricket. Hurt says, I really enjoyed your 56 minutes of Test cricket feature and the subsequent Footmark episode about the same topic. What are other T20 and or ODI games that evoke similar feelings for you personally, and why? The 2016 World Cup, Carlos Brathwaite was incredible. I think I wrote about 5,000 words on that game and could have written about 25,000 realistically. I actually interviewed Carlos Brathwaite not long after, and I think he just didn't want to talk about it anymore, which was a real shame because I was trying to ask different things to other people, but I don't think in his mind that he just didn't want to talk about it anymore, right? Which is completely fair. But yeah, I thought that's certainly one that comes off the top of my head. I suppose the Harmanpreet game at Leicester. Derby. It was another one that I was at, which was you are actually watching the sport change in front of you. Like, as in, you could see what was happening and what the impact was online. I still don't know if I've ever covered a women's match where the social media has been more hyped than it was for that game. So that was certainly a big one. I, I mean, there's probably other games, but those are the two that come to mind. Oh, one day games, obviously 2019 World Cup. I was lucky enough to be commentating, at Lords for that game. And I feel like I've never quite put everything else. I did write a piece after that, which I thought was really good, but the piece kind of bombed. So maybe it wasn't what people wanted at the time. I always thought there was a book to be written about that game. And I still think there's a book to be written about that game, but I don't know if we're in an environment where you'd be able to sort of sell that anymore. But I, I think that's one of the more interesting games, certainly I've ever covered. I can't think of any others off the top of my head. But I'm sure there are others that, um, that are up there. Maybe the Elise Perry World Cup game that I wrote about the other day is something else. But there's a reason why Test cricket does what it does. It's because it has the ability to build, and T20 games and one-day games don't do the same thing. Hurt says, to gamify and create excitement, ICC asks you to plan a boxing UFC style fight night, but cricket event. A bowler versus a batter. Please lay out the format, number of deliveries, etc. Pick 3 matchups, including one women's matchup to fill the night. I pre-picked Ravi to officiate the event. What you would De Villiers versus Stain? Garner versus Viv? Catherine Fitzpatrick versus Lizelle Lee. Yeah, what is it? You've got to get to a certain amount of runs off 24 balls, probably. So what? 50 off 24 balls for all 3 of them is probably how I would do it, I think. Yeah, I don't, I'm not, I don't know the right way of doing it, but I think that's what you wanted. But yeah. Ali says, lots of associate cricket being played nowadays. Why is anyone not created an annual international league of these associate teams with promotion and relegation? Because no one's in charge of cricket. Feels like there would be a minimum friction from other big boards to such a league, and it could also get decent money for associates. Yeah, I mean, no one's in charge, really. So you would need a bunch of different associate teams who all have good management who would come together and agree on such a plan, right? I always go back to the North Sea Oil Tournament. So this is for first class cricket, I want to say, but it might have been 50 over cricket as well, where they were going to have Netherlands, Ireland, and Scotland. Did I say North Sea Oil? Or is it North Sea? I don't know why I put oil in there. Maybe I can't remember. But the North Sea, there was a tournament they were going to have between the 3 of them because they were like, we don't have a strong enough situation where we can afford to have like multiple first class teams, but between us we could all get 2 or 3 teams that would be pretty good, maybe even 4 teams, and then we would have a really, really good way, like our own version of county cricket without having to be in county cricket. It's a really good idea. They couldn't bring it together just because it's really hard. The Dutch board were really quite amateur at the time. Scotland was even more amateur at the time. Ireland was the only one sort of looking ahead. How you would get sponsors and everything was really tricky. How you would split the money if Ireland was doing the vast amount of the work, like all these sorts of things were an issue. That's the same with all the associate countries. It's really tricky to be able to do these things. It's not a straight line. And so you end up in a situation where it almost never, we know for a fact that it would be much better if Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan all played in one T20 league together, and Nepal probably as well. Maybe Afghanistan, right? Like if they all played in one league together, it would just be better. It would be better for them. New Zealand should be playing with Australia. You could argue that South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia should do what the rugby does and have a tri-league, right? 2 teams in New Zealand, 3 teams in South Africa, the rest of the teams in Australia. It would be a much better idea. But these boards all have conflicting interests and everything else, and it just doesn't work. And that's why you don't do it. The 2 says, you've been put in charge of the rest of the women world team. Your goal is to beat Australia. What are some of the unexpected notable squad inclusions? Oh, that's a really good question. I think an exclusion might be Sophie Eccleston because doesn't she? I know she's just taken a wicket. Um, yes, doesn't she like just go for more runs against Australia? Than like she just doesn't have the same impact against Australia as she does against other sides. So you probably wouldn't play Sophie Eccleston, right? Um, I think what you'd want to do is you want a combination of the best players in the world. So obviously you want, Natsiva Brant and Wolfhard and Shruti Mandana. But you'd also probably want to look for specialists who specifically do well against Australia. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but that's probably what you want. You want Amelia Kerr. Um, you probably I don't know what Marizan Kap's record is, but you probably want someone like Marizan Kap because she gives you incredible flexibility. Same with Deepti Sharma, just giving you more flexibility. You want a team, and I don't know if there is a team that even I could make, but you want a team that is going to be able to take 10 wickets quite regularly. That's what you're looking to do. I think if you can take the 10 wickets against Australia, it makes it a lot easier to beat them. So what's England got them now? 121 for 4 halfway through that game. They're going to have to bowl them out to win that game, most probably, right? Or at least get them 9 down and. But if you don't bowl them out, like Sutherland's come into bat at what? Number 6. She's on 54. They got Gardner on 26. They got Talia McGrath to come in and whack them later. Sophie Molyneux and Kim Garth before. Like, you have to be able to bowl them out. So I think the most important thing is looking at bowlers who have good records against Australia over a decent period of time. So I would take Eccleston out, even though I think she might be, well, maybe not quite at the moment, but over a period of time, maybe he's been the world's best bowler. But I'd probably take her out of that side, unless there's no one else to put in. But because of that, that's kind of what you're doing. I think you want to mix and match the most talented players with people who are specialists against Australia. And then you've just got to take the 10 wickets. Mob says, with the exception of Rahul Dravid, who is the most trustworthy figure in world cricket, according to players, admins, and fan? That's a really good question. I mean, Rahul Dravid did work for Srinivasan's company, right? Like, there are probably people who don't look at him as high up, that he had that long relationship with Srinivasan. I mean, Sachin would be up there too, wouldn't he? I would have thought both Rahul Dravid and Sachin would be pretty high. I'm trying to think of other people that would be similar to those two guys. So what you want trustworthy? Is Misbah trustworthy? Kind of feel like he's like the arch trustworthy kind of guy. I was going to put Strauss in, but I don't know, Strauss KP stuff, maybe. Is there any West Indians? Are there any Australians? Yeah, I find that a really interesting question, but I don't know if I don't even know if Misbah counts. Like, I don't know if you would have him in that level. I suppose Kumar Sangakkara would be high. It's a fascinating question. I don't know if I've got a great answer for that. Ian says, bit of a pub debate question, but if you had to pick a really good club cricketer to play a game for a county, a state side, what role would someone be most likely to make a bit of a go of? Top order, batter, keeper, spinner, or seamer? Oh, and which role would produce the most spectacular fail? Okay, this is easy. The answer to this is none of your answers, but it's an all-rounder who bats a bit and bowls a bit. So, Evan Gulbis, anyone? Stuart Binney, James Hopes, those kinds of guys. I think the club version of those guys can generally, they stand up okay, right? They sort of a John Moss type cricketer. That's not going to help anyone who doesn't remember who John Moss is. But yeah, that sort of player who's canny with the ball. I played club cricket with a guy called, oh my God. I've now forgotten his name. Is it Bill Blair? I played club cricket with a guy who played, district cricket and then came to play with us late in his career. He's the sort of guy that he could bat a little bit. He probably was slightly less than what you would want for this kind of thing, but he would probably bat at number 8 and would be handy enough with the ball that he wouldn't make a disaster of himself in that kind of team, right? If he had played state level cricket. And so, but he was probably a club cricketer. And so I think there's a lot of those sorts of guys. Victoria makes heaps of them, actually, where you're just like, that's probably a club cricketer, but like a club cricketer is really good. You look at someone like James Hopes. I don't know if James Hopes would have dominated any level of cricket he would have played, but he would have been handy in every level and ends up playing for Australia. So I think that's the kind of cricket you're looking for. Can be useful with the ball, add something with the bat, probably fields quite well as a club cricketer, can probably moonlight as a frontline, like as a state level player without too many issues. The players that probably are going to struggle the most are going to be the top order batter. I think is going to be really, really tough. I would have thought that would be the position that, especially because you've written top order, there's just no hiding if you're not good enough in the top order. I've seen really good club players go up against first class players, and it's horrendous, right? Like they're just nowhere near it. Spinner's an interesting one for me as well. Because again, if you don't have the ability to keep the pressure on the player, I think, if you look at, this is an extreme example, and partly he was injured at this point, or coming back from injury, but not fully fit. But when Bryce McGain plays against South Africa and they realize that he's not ready to be bowling, there's no fizz on it. They can just absolutely massacre him without any fear. Like Callis and Ashwell Prince are running down the wicket and whacking him, right? So I think once you get to spin, you probably need that. Whereas if you're a club bowler who's picked, you probably have like an elite skill that maybe you might get smashed, but I don't think you get smashed the same way a spinner does. So I think the worst ones would be a top order batter and a spinner. Wicket keeper, as an actual wicket keeper, I don't think there would be any issue. I think there are probably better wicket keepers in club cricket than there are in professional cricket because of the way that there's a selection bias towards batting. So the actual wicket keeping, I don't think would be an issue. But if you're good enough wicket keeper from club cricket to make it, you're probably going to be a terrible batter. So you would probably stand out pretty poorly there. So it's weird. Almost in one way you'd be fine, and the other way you'd be terrible. It's a fantastic question, Ian. Anil says, with test attacks getting deeper, do you see a change in balance, like a 6 frontline bowler strategy being adapted by any team in the future? Would it even be significantly likelier to take 20 wickets? Yeah, once you get over 5, Anil, it becomes really, really tricky to manage the bowlers. That's why 5 is kind of like the sweet spot. You know that one bowler's probably going to get a bit of a bad go, but they might come back in the next game and have a big one. Once you get to 6 bowlers, you're actually looking at like 3 bowlers who are going to get a bit of an issue because they're not going to bowl that much, and that's going to cause some problems. We've seen 6 bowler attacks before, haven't we? England of recent times, South Africa have certainly had 6 bowlers before. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. Did India get to 6? I'd have to go back and have a look at some of those sides. But yeah, it's really about the management of them. It becomes very tricky. So I think that 5 frontline bowlers probably makes you 2 wickets better per game, right? I'm not sure if 6 frontline bowlers makes you 4 wickets better per game. And then I worry about over a long period of time, if it actually helps all that much. It's a very fascinating question, but I'd probably go with 5 makes more sense from just the way that you balance your attack. If you had 6 bowlers who are like frontline bowlers, but like 2 or 3 of them didn't particularly were good enough with the bat and were secured enough in their job that they were like, 20 overs a game, 15 overs a game. It's not a lot of overs, though, is it? But if you had that magical list, then 6 is probably better than 5. But if you've got 6 frontline bowlers, they're all going to want to bowl over 20 overs, right? A couple of them are going to want to bowl over 30 overs. That's going to be really hard to manage in that kind of a lineup. You have to think about that sort of the psychological effects, I think, as much as anything at that point. Cricket boards actually make watching their games almost impossible. I spend almost as much time trying to find where I can view it as I do actually following the action. That is why I use NordVPN. They let me find all the cricket I want to watch while protecting me from the nasty side of the internet. Nord will free your cricket matches. Grab your exclusive NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/good areas to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan plus 4 additional months on top. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Watch every match with NordVPN. Alex says, who should open the batting for Australia in the Ashes? Woodfull? I think if Marnus is back in form, I'd probably go with Marnus, right? Marnus and Usman, I think, make the most sense. I've got no problem with Marnus opening the batting if he's in form. The only thing they might say is, well, if he's in form, shouldn't he bat at 3? And then you use someone else to open. But I kind of think, I'm pretty flexible with guys. I've tried to explain this before. This is when you get really advanced in cricket. And like this is, Wagon is probably not a podcast for just the casual fan anyway. But like, are you a 3.5 or are you a 2.5, right? So a 3.5 is probably someone who bats at 3, but is maybe also a 4, right? Those sorts of number 3s usually can't open. But if you're a 2.5, so let's say Jonathan Trott or Royal Dravid, there's no real reason why you can't open. The team might just have other openers, or your number 3 was the spot that you came in and you did really well with. There's nothing within them technically that suggests that they can't handle the new ball. So maybe with Marnus, because he's a 2.5, I think, and Cameron Green's probably a 3.5, right? It probably makes more sense for Marnus to open with Usman and Cameron Green to bat at first drop. PJ says, Fairbreak Global and the guy behind it, whatever happened to them? Sean still sends me messages. So they've still got something going on. The reason it kind of fell apart, from my understanding, is that... Let me just have a look. I'm just trying to find... They've certainly got something going at the moment. The reason it fell apart is because... they had funding, I want to say from the UN, but they found some sort of grant. And that grant allowed them a lot of money to set this league up and to do all these things. And from what I understand, once that ran out, they just never got the sponsors that were ever going to be able to do that. So it was only ever short term. There's something called the Lyrebird Foundation, which I think is now what Sean is doing. The big issue that Sean had was, from what I could tell, and we did lots of research on this, Sean himself was not mega rich. So it wasn't like one of those situations where like he was a billionaire. So he wasn't like the guy who created Women's World Cup in 1973, right? Union Jack. He wasn't like that, where he had like so much money he could just do it himself. So he needed the grants and everything, which is why I can't remember the first time I met him was like 5 or 6 years before it happened. And it wasn't until they got that UN grant that they had enough funding that they could kind of push it in to become a league. And so that grant only lasted them so long, and I don't think they made enough money off the back end from it. So yeah, it was always going to lose money. Maybe if the grant had lasted them like 1 or 2 more editions, they could have actually got a decent sponsor, right? Maybe if the cricket had been slightly better and people would like watching it on TV, because the cricket they were doing the right thing, getting cricketers in from all around the world, but you had like bad club cricketers going up against some of the best players in the world. Like, it was such an odd league to watch, right? It goes back to Ian's question from before. So yeah, it's disappeared. He's got something else he's trying to do. But from all the research I'd ever done, it didn't feel to me like he had particularly a lot of money. And so I think the grant was what sort of kept it afloat. Sashimi says, why don't we have left arm part-time media pieces? Like, why are there no equivalent of Chris Harris or Scott Stone? This is a fantastic question that I don't know if I can answer. The last one I'm aware of is what? Brendan Nash from the West Indies? trying to think of any others. I think it's a really, really interesting one. I don't know if I have a great answer. The one thing I would say is that even left-handed batters, the vast majority of left-handed batters probably still bowl with their right arm. Maybe not the vast majority, but a big percentage of them are right-hand dominant, but bat left-handed. So that rules all of them out. And I think the other thing that happens, Sashimi, is that left arm finger spin is such a natural advantage in cricket that if you're a left arm medium pacer, and we've seen this throughout the history of the game, right? That left arm medium pacers quite often would bowl left arm finger spin. So Carson Garvery, Garfield Sobers, Graham Wag, was it? I forget his name. But there's been heaps of them. The left arm, and you also get like left arm seamers when they're young, like Michael Beer, Paul Harris, Ashley Giles, all were seamers, and then become left arm finger spinners. And I think it's just because it's a big advantage to be able to do that. And once you can nail that skill, even as a part timer, you're much more useful than you are as a medium pacer. So I think it might be the combination of those two factors. There's a South African one, isn't there, who I wrote about recently. Is it Trevor Goddard? Was certainly one. How many other medium pacers have there been? There really just hasn't been many. As I said, Brendan Nash is another one. Because Ganguly is what? Right arm medium pace, left hand batter. David Warner, right arm medium pace. Mike Hussey, right arm medium pace. I'm trying to think of some other left-handed batters who also bowl. Do you know what I mean? I think if any of those guys bowl left arm, they probably end up being finger spinners, not medium pacers. Because of the natural advantage of having a left arm finger spinner who can land the ball on the stumps and spin it away. So keep LBW caught behind and everything else in play. And even the part-time version of that is probably much more useful than the part-time version of any other bowling. Left-arm finger spin, a part-time left-arm finger spinner is probably the best kind of sixth bowler you can have. Almost in any situation, unless you're going up against a team with lots of left-handers. Reese says, what is your biggest knowledge gap in terms of cricket history? Anything you have been interested in but never really had the time to research? I've never been a big expert in the kind of 1950s. I've got like little knowledge gaps. Like weirdly, I don't know a lot about the Indian side from up until probably 1970. Like just a random one that I don't know why. 1950s in general is probably my weakest era, I would say. 1920s is pretty weak too. Those would probably be the two that I don't know a lot about. And then there's like little ones, like I said, with the Indian team there. West Indies 1930s perhaps would be another one. Maybe even. Actually, no, because I know a little bit about the other teams. Yeah, that would be another one where I think that's probably a team I should know more about. I don't know a lot about women's cricket really before the 1970s. And I know a lot about the 1970s because of the World Cups. And I would say I probably don't know much about women's cricket in the 1980s as well. So there's a few bits there. Generally, it's one of those things of if there's a particular player or story. So I did a big piece on Irish cricket, which actually taught me a lot about Scottish cricket because I had to then go and research a lot on Scotland in the same period because that was their major team. So I ended up knowing a lot about Scottish cricket, even though I wasn't researching that. And that's generally what happens for me is there's a particular story that leads me into that period of time or that country or whatever it may be. And so once I find it, I kind of like fill my knowledge gap up again very quickly. So it's very rare that I'm probably never going to go back and do a piece on the 1950s, right? Although I might one day, but I'm more likely to probably learn more about the 1950s because I'm researching a bunch of players who are really important in that period, or one player who's really important. And that's how I kind of fill those gaps up. So I wouldn't say, so when I did the history of Test cricket, I knew 1950s was my worst kind of period because, and so I did a bit of research on it. But I did so much research on all the others that it's like it lifted, but it was still lower than all the other regions. So yeah, that's probably the best answer. Oh, I would also say, this is going back, but I'm not particularly great 1850s to 1770s. Some of that is trickier. Like I know what I need to know, but I can't tell you as much about Fuller Pilch as I should be able to tell you. Like I can tell you who he is, and I can tell you why he's important, but I don't have all the information on some of those guys that I probably should. Karen says, "Oh my God, this is long." Virat Kohli's retirement from Test cricket still feels premature to many of us. Few players in modern cricket have shown his. Okay, so he's really, really good. Get that. True Test selection, even a 15,000 run great. It was Virat Kohli. From your perspective, what do you think led to someone so headstrong and committed to excellence step away while he still had the ability, hunger, and physical readiness to redefine his Test career? It was 5 years, Karen, of him not making any runs. Right? 5 years with 1 year where he makes runs in the middle of all that. That's a long time to fail when you're not used to failing in your life. And he's never failed like that in anything else. I still believe that he was right to do it. And I tell you why. I think that the player I always compared him to the most was Ricky Ponting. And Ricky Ponting also really struggled when he was older. I don't know if those guys, you talk about adjusting his technique. I think he could have adjusted his mindset and his approach. I don't know if he could have fixed his technique. We might be seeing it with Babar Azam. We've probably seen it with other players before, and we've just thought they've gotten old. But actually, what's happened is people have just worked out how to bowl to them. I don't know if Virat Kohli would have ever consistently made runs again in Test cricket. And I think he was starting to believe that as well. And because of that, he's decided to leave. So it's a tough era he was playing in at the end. If it had been a more like Ricky Ponting's era, where he could have averaged 35 to 40, I reckon he probably plays on. But it looked more brutal because, we're talking about averaging in the 20s. Ajit says, do you feel cricketers view both the ODI and T20 World Cups at the same level? Obviously, they want to win. But would Rohit Sangakkara be more upset at not having an ODI title versus Watson Reina for not having a T21? No, those players definitely would not feel the same. Those older players definitely, without any doubt, there's a reason that Rohit and Virat are still playing after winning a World Cup. And it's because they want to win the 50 over World Cup. If they thought the T20 World Cup was on the same level, they would have retired then, I reckon. I 100% believe that. So, no, they don't. It's not really how it works, though, because, Ajit, the 50 over World Cup doesn't really get to that level until 2003, 2007 either. That's the first generation. By 2007, you have the first generation of cricketers who grew up believing one-day cricket was as important as Test cricket, or comparable, and the World Cup was as important as Test cricket. I know this because I've talked to them about it. Like, there were players still playing in the early 2000s who were like, yeah, it's just one-day cricket though, isn't it? So this generation of players that you're talking about, so Watson, Reina, no, who did you have? Yeah, Watson, Reina, Rohit Sangakkara. They all grew up with 50 over cricket, World Cups being, in their mind, as important as Test cricket. Not the entire ODI cricket, but certainly the World Cups. They didn't grow up with T20 cricket at all in some cases. So why would they have that on the same level? They won't. That's the next generation. So at the moment, no. In 10 years' time, it won't. It'll have changed again. Adityan says, do you know why Australia moved past Jess Jonassen? She averaged below 20 in both 2022 and 2023 in ODIs. I didn't play for them in 2024 and 2025 and struck every 25 balls. She's also a left-hander, going with the current theme of women's cricket. What should she do if she wants her place back? 175 for 4. Need to bowl them out now. Ash Gardner. Ash Gardner is part of the reason that Jess Jonathan is gone. Jess Jonathan was, again, probably before Sophie Eccleston, one of the best bowlers in the world. Was probably the best bowler in the world for a little while, I would say, is fair. I think they've got a particular kind of team that they're building, and that they can look. It's the fact that they dropped Elise Perry as well. Let's not forget. So Jess Jonathan with the bat, specifically in T20 cricket, is almost a 0. One-day cricket, a little bit better than that. She's been replaced by Sophie Molyneux, who has not actually made a lot of runs at the moment. But I think they believe, and I could be wrong, but I think the idea is that she could be a much better bat than Jess Jonathan. And so I think they're thinking, and Sophie Molyneux, let's just have a look at her bowling record. She's averaging 19 with the ball and at an economy of 4. And they think that she's at the very least a same level of bat as Jess Jonathan. So, oh wait, have I got the right numbers? No, that was Jess Jonathan's numbers. I'll go back. I'll get this right. I'm going to get this right eventually. Sophie Molyneux in 15 games has 29 wickets at 14 and an economy of 3.6. Whether she's as good as Jess Jonathan or not, let's put that to the side. I think they think she's comparable to her, and I think they think she's a better bat. So she's averaging 25 in Test cricket for 3 games, and she's averaging. She hasn't made a lot of runs in the first class game. In one-day game at the moment. But if you look at her Big Bash record, she averages 20 with a strike rate of 106. And if you look at Jess Jonathan's women's Big Bash record, she averages 25 with a strike rate of 116. So she's what? How much younger? 5-6 years younger, Molyneux? I just think that there's 2 of them. Then you've got Ash Gardner, right? Who, again, is another frontline finger spinner who can obviously bat better than Jess Jonathan. So I think a lot of it is just moving towards that other player. They've got so many different options available to them. I would probably still have picked Jess Jonathan, but if you want me to go, and I don't know what she can do to come back in, because Molyneux's just going to keep dominating herself, right? So it's really hard. Rob says, wondering why more infielders aren't learning to throw with both arms. Do they not have enough time to learn that skill? Not enough value in the skill to warrant the effort? I mean, the 2 that come to mind are Ian Harvey. How many times have I mentioned Ian Harvey on podcasts today? Ian Harvey and Alan Border. They're like 1.5 fielders, having someone who can do that in the ring. Weirdly enough, in modern cricket, the best fielders don't field in the ring anymore. Right? So maybe it's not as valuable now. I think you need to be ambidextrous to do it, though. I could be wrong, Rob. I think you need to be ambidextrous. Now, there are ambidextrous cricketers who don't throw with both arms. But I think if you find a young cricketer who's ambidextrous, you should probably... I think I could probably teach my son to do it. He's left-handed, but he's pretty good with right-handed stuff. I think I could probably teach him how to do it. Whereas most of the other kids I've ever coached, I don't even think I would attempt it. So I think you do need a sort of a basic level of ambidextrousness to do it. It would be really handy in the ring. You're not wrong, because we saw Ian Harvey and Alan Border be really good because of this. So yes, if ring fielders were still important, I think you'd do it. I don't think it helps as much on the bat. Not to say it wouldn't. I don't know if anyone would be a strong enough thrower. And my memory of Alan Border and Ian Harvey with their off arms was that you probably wouldn't have been able to do it from the boundary. Like, they could throw the ball in from the boundary, but I don't think they would have been able to do it with enough pace to get a run out. So you would have to almost have a specialist infielder who is ambidextrous, and then you could help them with it. It would be a great skill to have, and I think one day we'll get there, but we're obviously not quite there yet. Ali says, could you see a Savannah Bananas or Harlem Globetrotters version in cricket? So the interesting thing about this, Ali, and for those who don't know, most of you know the Harlem Globetrotters, but there's a baseball team called the Bananas who are like an entertainment team, right? First. The interesting thing about this, Ali, is that we had this. This is what cricket used to have in the 1800s. Cricket pioneered this. And it kind of disappeared as, I suppose, county cricket comes in, where it doesn't make sense for you to go off and play in those teams anymore. But we definitely had a version of this before. I don't know. Baseball and basketball are really interesting because baseball, even when you're a long way from the pitcher, unless you're in the bleachers, you're pretty close to the pitcher and the batter at all times. So the personality and everything else is easier to pick up. And in basketball, people are really close to the court, right? I'm not talking about big stadiums. I'm talking about this kind of entertainment kind of sport. Is it harder to do in a sport where the average person is 70 meters away? Well, the average person is like 85 meters away from the action, 90 meters away from the action. Is it harder to pick that up? I don't know. Based on the 1800s, I'd say you can do it. There were all sorts of things that went on in the 1800s. Cricket was so far ahead of every other sport in the world. It's a real shame that we've allowed this to kind of go backwards. So yeah, that's probably how I would look at it if that's the angle I was going for. So I worry about it from that perspective. But yeah, I think you could do a sort of entertainment-led cricket team if you wanted to. Mob says, Ashes derangement syndrome. Question. Despite everything Cricket Australia and Andrew McDonald have said about not selecting Mitch Marsh, how many tests do Australia have to lose before Mitch Marsh gets a mad caller? So, interestingly enough, off air, me and Varun were just talking about the Australian team and about whether they can baseball. And if they get to a point where they're like 2 tests down, right? Do they just go, stop trying to make normal runs? We can't make normal runs. Let's baseball. And do you then have a lineup of Head opens with Marsh, Green at 3, Smith at 4, Inglis at 5, Webster, I don't know, Maxwell or something. It's not going to be Maxwell, but, I'm trying to think of someone else that it would be further down the order. That's how Marsh gets back in. I can't imagine they would do that with McDonald and Cummins in charge. But maybe, potentially. PJ says, who was better, Callis as a bowler or Pollock as a batter? Fun fact, they both made their international debuts in the same series, did they? I don't remember that. I know a lot about Callis's bowling, and I've done a little bit on Pollock's batting, but let me just bring Pollock's batting back up so I can have a look at it here. Specifically with Pollock, I want to see his first class numbers. He averages 33 in first class cricket with the bat. And he averages 32.3. Okay. So I want to compare them as frontliners. I think Callis was more likely to have been the 5th to be a frontline bowler if you needed it and he hadn't played anything else. And I think Pollock is probably still more of a number 7 with the bat rather than a number 6. No matter what you do, you break it down. I just want to have a look at if he ever batted in other positions in Test cricket. Yeah, he averages 32 at number 7, which is great. But I don't think there's anything to suggest that he should have batted at number 6. Whereas I think that Callis, if Callis had never batted at all and just worked on his bowling, I think you can make a claim that he would have been a better frontline bowler than Pollock would have been as a batter. So yeah, I'll go in that direction. Really, really good question. I really like that a lot. Let's have a quick break here, and then when we come back from this quick break, we will finish up with any super chats here on your favorite podcast where we answer questions about nerdish cricket things, the Wagon Wheel. Watch every match with Nord. Head to nordvpn.com/good areas to get a discount on VPN. Play safe with Nord. Rohit says, should Nepal be given test status? Huge potential nation. Well, I mean, they've got to actually do better at cricket. There are other associate teams doing better at cricket at the moment than Nepal. I don't think there should be test status anymore, Rohit. So I'm probably the wrong person to ask for this. Everyone should have test status. So yes, they should be given it. Partly for the reason that you've just suggested. Them and Japan, right? And USA. The benefits of them having test status and them taking test cricket seriously, I think, is huge for cricket going ahead. But everyone should get it. But based on if you're doing it based on how teams go at the moment, I don't think there's really anything within their cricket that makes me think that they should have it above other teams. Oh, no, I can't. Samit says, carrying on from the Kimapa show, doesn't South Africa have a serious claim for being the best team in 5 years? Mapaka, Brevis, Kotsia. Kotsia is 25, is he? I thought he was about 27, 28. Janssen, Stubbs, Mulder, Britsky, Ferreira, Dazorzi, and everyone else. Where did we have them? We had them at second or third. Is that right? No, we had them at third. Okay, so just having a look at this side, you've got Mapaka. I don't know how good he's going to be. I find him very, very confusing. I'm not as high on him. Brevis, I think, will be a fantastic player. Stubbs is going to be a fantastic player. Mulder, I'm still not sure on. Britsky, I'm still not sure on. Ferreira, I'm still not sure on. Dazorzi would be a good player. And Verena. Yeah, I think they're there. I think we had them as third. England have some good players coming through as well. I think you can make a claim that either South Africa or England could be second. I think that's probably fair. I don't think I would have based on what you've said here. So if I go on bowlers more than batters, right? So you've got Kotsia, Janssen, and Mapaka up against Washington Sundar, Arshdeep Singh, Prashid Krishna, Harshit Rana. I'm missing someone as well. So you might get a. And then the South African batting isn't as good as the Indian batting. So I can't see them getting above India in that kind of that one at all. Or Nagarjun. Try and go through Nagarjun here. Can I see his message? No, I think he put another one in anyway. So I'm not sure what happened with that one. Ekant says, Jarrod, long time since I did this, so we'll ask 5 questions. Okay. What's the most what's been the most inspired phase in your career? Inspired phase in my career. In my career, it's probably that period from 20. It's probably one big period from 2012 to 2015. So in 2012, my wife was pregnant. We didn't have a child at that point. I was going to Sri Lanka, for a month for the World Cup. And I said, when I come back, I'm going to have a job. And when I came back, I was basically senior writer for Cricinfo, right? So I went from doing a bit of videos for them to basically being their senior writer. And then I spent the next, up until 2015 Ashes, or 2015 World Cup, no, 2015 Ashes, I spent every waking moment I had to become the best cricket writer in the world, right? Which is a nonsensical thing to say. But I wanted to be the best cricket. It didn't really matter if you become the best cricket writer in the world. I'm trying to become the best cricket writer I can become. So that's probably the most inspired. That's like kind of that sort of thing of what was I, 32 to 35. I'm a late bloomer. I'm trying to catch up to everyone really quickly. Other people who've been working in the industry for 10, 20, 30 years. I was parking cars like 5 years earlier as a job. So I'm trying to catch up with everyone and everything. So that's probably the most. I didn't have any kids, so I wasn't worried about that. So everything is thrown onto the page at that point. And when I got to 2015, I realized that then I'd kind of achieved what I wanted to achieve, and then things started to change after that. Nug Arjun says, read Kim up a segment on cricket under apartheid. Please interview Peter Hain and Andre Odendal. Hain, now a UK politician, organised boycotts of the Gadding Rebel Tour. And Odendal is a proper Ram Guha style historian. Yeah, I mean, if I ever get to that, I mean, that's a different thing than Kimapa, having people like that on. There's lots of really interesting people. I think the story's been told well, but yeah, for Kimapa, we wouldn't get guys like that on. That's, maybe if we're in person and we could do it in person, and Robbie knew more about those sorts of things, we would. But yeah, I've covered the apartheid thing quite a few times because I probably covered it more than most people have because I've also covered the women's side of it, and also I've covered the formation of the ICC. So in that particular one, I'll probably go in a different direction. But if I was doing like a book or something, I would contact those guys. Ikant says, what pieces of your work do you wish got more attention? And would you have changed Polite Inquiries if it had blown up? Would you have changed Polite Inquiries if it had blown up? Like get millions of views regularly. It did, to be weirdly enough. I mean, Polite Inquiries has probably had hundreds and hundreds of, it probably had close to 1 billion views. What pieces of work do you wish you got more attention? The Asif Karim piece, the Sean Tate piece, obviously the Muhammad Archewell piece. I mean, that's probably the main one. Archie Afghanistan, Shahid Afridi of Kansas piece is probably the main one. Most of the features, I suppose. Emma, oh my God, why have I forgotten her last name? The piece on the Hong Kong women's captain, Emma Lai? Emma Lai, yeah. Emma Lai, I think that's an inspirational piece that is worth, that people didn't really pick up. Those are just ones off the top of my head. It's mostly the feature ones that just haven't got, gone on. I mean, if you look even of recent times, the Women's World Cup, the first Women's World Cup or the first Cricket World Cup, right, piece is like just one that I wish would have gone more. The New Zealand batting openers piece is another one, which I'm like that's probably one of the best things we've ever done on Good Areas, and I think should be more famous than the Neil Wagner piece, but just didn't. We released it in 3 different parts, and I think that was part of the issue. It just didn't work. Maybe if we released it as one documentary, it would have been a little bit different. But yeah, those are the things. Those are the ones, but there's heaps. I mean, most of it is failure, right? It's like a batter. More often not than you're failing more than anything else. By the way, I saw your old articles on Jesse Ryder and the one on Medium about giving feedback to fan writers. They've aged amazingly well. Yeah, so Jesse Ryder, that's a piece. I almost brought that one up as well. Jesse Ryder is a piece that I went to write. So David Hops was like, I'm not asking you to write heaps of county cricket stuff, but it'd be great if you could go and write 2 or 3 really good county cricket pieces every year, which is, I think, where the Benny Howe stuff comes from. Jesse Ryder. Shahid Afridi was another one. The Shahid Afridi piece came out of that as well. And he's right. I would still love to be able to do that, right? You just don't have the ability to be able to go and do those pieces as much with the way that our business runs at the moment. But, love being able to do that. Jesse Ryder was a perfect example of, I wanted to write a piece about a county cricket that wasn't about county cricket so that people who didn't like county cricket would still like it, but county cricket fans would like it. And so, I was lucky enough. I had a relationship with Jesse. He's not a brilliant interview, but it was a really good chat that we had. And I ended up writing what was one of my best pieces. It had a huge amount of reads for a county cricket piece, right? But probably a fraction of what I would have got writing a test piece for Cricinfo at the same time. So you're still really happy about that. The Medium one that you talk about is, I asked people one day, I think I was on a way to fly somewhere, and I was like, just send me as many articles as you can, if you're an amateur writer, and I will have a look at them. And I gave everyone feedback. There was like one brilliant writer who I don't think she writes anymore, but her article, I said, I'm sorry, I can't give you any feedback. This is perfect. This is not, it's just a beautiful bit of writing. But mostly they were not. Mostly it was people talking about The Dark Knight. It was way too much stuff about The Dark Knight. Really, really bad writing at times, and some really interesting ideas not always pulled off correctly as well. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of help people as best as I could, I suppose. So yeah. That was fun. That piece is still up there. Ecount, is this? I feel like I'm telling my life story through Ecount here. Which personal trait have you best converted into a skill? I suppose it's the obsessiveness, right? Like, I've got this theory that great sports riders are quite often on spectrums. And there are some really good ones that are not. Like Usman Samyuddin, I think he's a very normal human being who occasionally gets obsessed with a topic and then nails it as a writer. But if you look at many of the greatest writers I've come up with, or greatest journalists I've come up with, quite often they are on a spectrum, or find out that they're on a spectrum later on. And that obsessiveness. I'm really interested in talking to Pablo Torre. I know Pablo a little bit, but I'd really like to talk to him. I'd be interested to know if he's on a spectrum. But, listening to his podcast, his ability to go off and just go through every single detail of something until he finds the answer. It's just not a thing a normal person does, right? And so I think for me, it's the same sort of thing of, I was writing a piece recently. Like sometimes I will come up with an idea that I think is like a 1,200 word piece. But once I peel back a layer, I'm like, oh, this could be 5,000 or 7,000 words. And that's because I just keep finding layers and I keep pulling at them. And most of the time, other people will not do that. So I think that's probably where it comes from. Well, that's the one. Akash says, does Sutherland have a higher ceiling than Perry? That's a really good question. No. Because I think she's always going to be more of a middle overs bowler than a frontline bowler. So Perry's basically Keith Miller, right? She can open the bowling, and I'm talking about Perry at her best, and bat at 3 or 4, right? So even better than Miller in some ways. I think Sutherland's probably batting at 4 is a potential for her. Australia have so many good players. She may never get that high, but it's a potential for her. I don't see her as a genuine new ball bowler, though. And that's where you're going to have the most impact. And that Perry at her best was a brilliant new ball bowler and could bat at 3. Ecount says, if you could interview Grace, WG, not Grace Harris, although she'd be fascinating too, from any point in his life, but could only ask 3 questions, what would they be? I want to know at what stage he realized that he could come forward and go back. That's the first one I want to know with Grace. The second one I want to know about Grace is how much of it does he think? Does he think there could have been better cricketers than him who just weren't coming through the system because they weren't from an amateur system? They didn't have the family wealth to be able to do that, and they couldn't spend the amount of time. Like, how much of it was he had the time to be able to practice because his family didn't need him to get a job at 12, right? Did that play a part? And third, does he regret not staying? No, does he regret being a doctor more seriously for that 5-year period when he was still kind of in his prime age-wise? End of his prime, but in his prime-ish. Like, now, like, he ended up making a lot more money in his career from being a cricketer than he ever did from being a doctor. Obviously, he partly did that to keep his family happy. But if he could go back and just be like, dedicate his entire life to cricket, knowing that that was actually what he was doing anyway, did he give up a few years of his prime by, I don't know, putting leeches on people, which is what I think they did. Ecount says, if T20s got big when 50 over cricket got big, which format would be called one-day cricket? I think it would still be maybe one day it just becomes 50 overs then, or has a different name. I don't think there would be something called one day cricket if that was the case. I think both would have had different names. Ecount's going to keep me on this podcast for the rest of my life. Okay, bonus. What's your favorite emoji? And thanks for indirectly and probably unwittingly helping me get to cricket journalists. I texted you when I got in over 3 years ago, and you were nice there. Oh, well, thank you very much. You can't. My favorite emoji. I don't know. Oh, it's probably the cash emoji. I do like a cash emoji. out of nowhere. It's probably the one. Is it like a bag of cash? I think it's the bag of cash emoji. I'm not like the world's biggest emoji guy, but I do like that. I like a GIF, and like GIFs are like really boomer. Like I'm like probably even too young for GIFs myself, but I'm a big fan of GIFs. Especially if I remember the original context of which the GIF was like in a movie or TV show or online. Ekant says, love the New Zealand Openers video. Maybe you can just consolidate it and upload it wholly. It's timeless. Just my 2 cents. Yeah, I think at the time when we made it, it was actually, computers are much better now than even when we started. It was about the computer. It's such a layered piece. I've never met John Boyce, but like John Boyce puts his up as individual parts. And I would assume it's the same thing. Once you layer as many different things on top of the graphics, it just clogs up the CPU and everything. And programs like Final Cut really struggle with that sort of stuff, especially when it comes to the exporting and everything else. So we had a video that basically has never been released because we tried to do it in one piece, which will be like, I will do it eventually because I really like the script of it, but it will have to be done differently now than it was originally. But yes, that's why we've done them in parts. We want to get to the point where we make more documentary type things. And if you've ever seen the New Zealand Openers piece, you'll know it's a documentary, right? It's a fun documentary, but it's a documentary. That guy says, tell us if you know anything about the Indian leg spinner, Subhash Chandra. I've heard he had the potential to be an all-time great, but left cricket due to a career-ending controversy. He's a fantastic player. He's one of the players, when people were asking before about my dead spots, he's kind of one of the, like, I know who he is, and I know little bits about him, but he actually plays in my double dead spot, my early India spot and my 1950s spot. I know he's really good, and I know I've gone over his record. I think eventually I'll probably do a project on him just because I want to know more about him myself. I think he was a fantastic cricketer, and I want to know everything I can about his I think there might even be a book on him. But I've got a bunch of other projects at the moment that I'm doing. So yeah, but I think he is someone that I'll probably try and get to one day. That guy again says, what do you like to do in your free time? What are we doing here, guys? There aren't that many of you on the live today. Generally, I'll have like 5 times as much because there's the World Cup game on, although Australia, as I said, didn't bowl them out. They're going to win it easily in the end. Because there's not that many people here. I've got 1 million super chats. What do I do in my free time? I watch a lot of basketball. I watch a lot of movies. Spend a lot of time with my kids. I suppose those are probably the 3 main things that I do. A lot of fitness as well when I can. So those are probably the main ones off the top of my head. Andy says, how much is India's T20 ceiling is limited by not playing overseas leagues? Do they have knowledge at grassroots to nurture a conveyor belt of quicks? It's an interesting question, that, Andy. I don't know if I have a great answer for it. But yes, I think you're right. I think eventually there's a limit. But is it gonna be like America and basketball, like in the NBA, where other teams maybe have more rounded players from Europe or South America or Asia, right? Because they've played in multiple different leagues and they don't play that sort of American style of basketball. But will it matter because the Indian players are going to be so much more talented, right? That's maybe the argument that you would have there. But yeah, I've said before, I think India, could dominate even more if they had everyone. Ace says, IPL coverage should be like All City Network or Locked On. We are wasting the potential of IPL coverage. Hope it improves. I'm in the middle, as I have been for about 5 years, Ace, of trying to do this. I think the All City one's a bit different. The All City Network's really quite fascinating, but All City is actually based on sports in a city, not basketball. So they have coverage of football and baseball and hockey and all sorts of things. So the idea of the All City Network is that, I don't know, Chicago has 6 or 7 teams that are worth covering. and that they cover them from sort of more of a fan bent, but a professional fan bent, right? It's almost like semi-pro. Some of them are quite professional, and some of them are a bit more amateur in the sorts of people they have on the All City Network. But it's a fascinating one. I actually wanted to talk to Adam Mares, who's one of the people who founded it, a while back about it when I was trying to get my own versions up. And he said yes, and then I think he got busy and I got busy. We never got to chat about it after that. Locked On is a far more fascinating model, I think, for the IPL. Yes is the answer, because I've been trying to build this since, 2018, 2019. So yes, Locked On Network is certainly something that we would do. Me and Robbie and Deepak are trying to get a business that kind of does that at the moment. This isn't just an IPL thing. I don't think international teams are covered correctly for the same reason. So I would say right across, we have covered cricket based on a newspaper model, which is kind of a news / general coverage, right? Most cricket fans want to know who the next fast bowler is, what the future is, why did they hire this assistant coach and not this assistant coach? All these, that's what real fans want to know. And in cricket, we don't cover any of that at all. Even a little bit. We do not cover the sport the way that we should. So yeah, thank you very much for everyone's super chat. I'm going to turn it off before someone sends another one in. What do we have? If you haven't seen the Elise Perry video, it is definitely worth going to have a look at that. And the Nat Siva Brunt one on Women's World Cup. We have a little bit on the new fourth format coming up shortly. We've got a couple of video features as well on part-timers and what's the other one? We've got part-timers. Oh, and most improved player in Test cricket. So we've got a couple of great pieces coming up. So head over to the main channel when you can. Subscribe, share, like. Thank you very much. And thank you to our super chatters who went above and beyond with a near record amount of super chats on a slow day. We'll see you again next time here on the Good Areas Live. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now.